Your father built this empire with blood, Kaito, and now you want to pretend you're clean? The man standing across the long black table slammed his hand down. You think the Arashi name can survive without fear? The room went silent. At the head of the table sat Kaito Arashi. Calm, cold, untouchable. I don't pretend, he said quietly. I control. The older men exchanged uneasy looks. One of them leaned forward. Control won't stop the Korean syndicate from coming for us. Kaito's dark eyes hardened. Let them try. Suddenly, boom, the windows exploded inward. Gunfire ripped through the building. Ambush. Protect the boss. Men rushed forward as bullets tore through the room. Kaito grabbed a pistol and fired back with deadly precision. 2 attackers dropped instantly, but more flooded the street outside. An explosion shook the hallway. Boss, we need to move. Go through the back. Kaito turned to follow. Then a shot rang out. A bullet slammed into his side. He staggered. Blood spread across his black shirt. Boss, I'm fine, Kaito growled. But his vision blurred. His men dragged him through a dark alley as sirens began to echo across Tokyo. Lose them, one guard shouted. Footsteps thundered behind them. More gunshots. Then chaos separated them. Kaito stumbled alone into a narrow street behind a small clinic. His strength was fading fast. Blood soaked his hand. The door behind him suddenly opened. A woman stepped outside in a white coat. Dr. Natalie Rowan froze when she saw the wounded stranger leaning against the wall. Gunshots echoed somewhere down the street. Kaito looked at her through fading vision. Go back inside, he muttered. Natalie rushed forward instead. You've been shot. Not your problem. She ignored him and pressed her hands against the wound. Blood poured through her fingers. If I don't stop this bleeding, you're dead. Kaito grabbed her wrist weakly. You don't understand what you're getting into. Natalie's voice stayed calm. I understand you're dying. Another explosion shook the street. Natalie dragged him toward the clinic door. You can threaten me later, she said. Right now I'm saving your life. Inside the clinic, she forced him onto an examination table. His breathing was getting worse. The bullet had punctured his airway. Natalie grabbed a surgical kit. I have to open your airway, she said quickly. Kaito stared at her through fading consciousness. For a moment his eyes focused sharply on her face. Something about her looked familiar. Rainwater dripped from his hair. He whispered something weakly. Takumi. Natalie froze. Her heart skipped. How do you know that name? She asked. But Kaito had already lost consciousness. Outside, sirens screamed closer. Natalie stared at the unconscious man on her table. Something about this stranger suddenly felt impossible. The next morning, sunlight crept through the small apartment window. Mom, a small boy ran into the kitchen holding a toy dinosaur. Breakfast. Dr. Natalie Rowan laughed softly. Yes, Takumi. Sit down. 4-year-old Takumi Rowan climbed onto his chair happily. Natalie placed pancakes on his plate. Her fatherly instincts softened her normally serious face. You have school today, she said. Takumi groaned. I want to stay with you. You said that yesterday. And the day before. He grinned. Natalie kissed the top of his head. You'll survive. Her phone buzzed suddenly. The clinic. She answered. Yes. Dr. Rowan. The nurse said nervously. The patient from last night. Natalie frowned. What about him? He woke up. Natalie sighed. Good. Keep him under observation. There was a pause. Then the nurse whispered. Doctor, you might want to come quickly. Why? Another pause. There are men here. Natalie grabbed her coat. What kind of men? The nurse lowered her voice. The kind with guns. 30 minutes later, Natalie walked into the clinic. The waiting room was silent. For large men in black suits stood along the walls. All of them watching her. One stepped forward. Our boss is waiting for you. Natalie folded her arms. And who exactly is your boss? The door behind them opened. The wounded man from last night stepped out slowly. His bandage was still visible beneath his shirt. But now he looked very different. Powerful. Dangerous. In control. He met her eyes calmly. My name, he said, is Kaito Arashi. Natalie stared at him. Even she knew that name. The most feared Mafia leader in Tokyo. And she had just saved his life. Kaito studied her face carefully. A faint, curious smile touched his lips. You saved me yesterday, doctor. Natalie crossed her arms. Yes. He stepped closer. Now we need to talk. Natalie didn't move. About what? Kaito's dark eyes sharpened. About your son. The machines in the small room made a steady beep-beep sound. It was the only noise in the quiet clinic. Natalie sat in a chair by the bed, her eyes tired but alert. She had stayed up all night watching the man she had pulled from the shadows. His face was calm now, but she knew the danger that lived behind his closed eyes. Suddenly, the man's hand moved. His fingers gripped the white bedsheets. His eyes snapped open, and for a second, they were filled with confusion. He tried to sit up, but he groaned and grabbed his side where the bullet had hit him. Stay down, Natalie said. Her voice was as calm as a frozen lake. You have 10 stitches in your side. If you move, you will rip them open. I did not work that hard to save you just so you could bleed on my floor again. The man froze. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. He didn't look like a dying man anymore. Even in a hospital gown, he looked like someone who gave orders and expected everyone to obey. You have a lot of courage, doctor, he said. His voice was low and rough. Most people would be shaking if they knew who I was. Do you know whose life you held in your hands last night? Natalie didn't blink. She stood up and checked the clear bag of medicine hanging above his bed. I don't care about your name or your business. To me, you were just a man with a hole in his chest. In this room, I am the one in charge. Not you. The man let out a short, dry laugh that turned into a cough. My name is Kaito Arashi. People in this city whisper my name in fear. I lead the Arashi family. My enemies are everywhere, and now, you are a part of my story. Natalie crossed her arms over her white coat. She felt a chill go down her back, but she did not let it show on her face. She had heard of the Arashi family. They were the shadows that ran the city's darkest corners. She realized she had saved the most dangerous man in Japan. I took an oath to save lives, Mr. Arashi, she replied coldly. That is all this is. Once you can walk, you will leave my clinic and never come back. I have a son to think about. I don't want your world touching mine. Kaito looked at her with a strange expression. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper, like he was seeing something he hadn't seen in a long time. The world does not work like that, Natalie, he whispered. He used her name for the first time, and it made her heart skip a beat. You saved the devil, and the devil always pays his debts. Whether you like it or not, you are mine to protect now. Natalie turned away to gather her tools, her heart thumping against her ribs. She tried to act like his words didn't matter, but she knew everything had changed. The quiet life she had built for her and Takumi was over. The days after Kaito left the clinic were quiet, but Natalie felt like someone was watching her. She walked the same streets in Tokyo to get home, but the air felt different. When she went to the market, the shopkeeper smiled more than usual. When she walked through the park, the scary men who used to hang out on the corners suddenly moved away to let her pass. She felt a strange bubble of safety around her, but she didn't know why. At the hospital, Natalie worked harder than ever. She moved from room to room, fixing broken bones and sewing up cuts. She was famous for being the doctor with no fear. She didn't care if a patient was a rich businessman or a rough man from the docks. To her, they were all just people who needed help. One afternoon, a large black car parked across the street from the hospital. Kaito sat in the back behind dark glass. He watched Natalie through the window of the lobby. He saw her helping an old woman carry her bags. He saw her laughing with a little boy who had a scraped knee. Kaito was confused. In his world, everyone wanted something from him. His men followed him because they were afraid. His enemies followed him because they wanted to kill him. But Natalie didn't want his money or his power. When she looked at him, she didn't see a mafia boss. She only saw a man who needed stitches. She is a very strange woman, boss, his driver said, looking at the mirror. She refuses to take the gift we sent to her office. Kaito smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. She doesn't want a gift. She wants her freedom. That is what makes her different. Kaito began to send his men to stand in the shadows near her house. He made sure her electricity bill was paid before she even saw it. He bought the grocery store near her apartment just to make sure they always had her favorite American coffee in stock. He was protecting her like a ghost. He wanted to keep her safe, but he also wanted to see how long it would take for her to notice him. Natalie was not a fool. She noticed the black car. She noticed that her favorite coffee was always on the shelf. One evening, as she walked up the stairs to her apartment, she stopped. She sensed a shadow moving in the hallway. "I know you are there, Kaito," she called out into the dark. Her voice didn't shake. Kaito stepped out from behind a pillar. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and respect. "I told you that I pay my debts, doctor. You saved my life. I am simply making sure nobody takes yours." Natalie looked him right in the eye. "I don't need a bodyguard. I need you to leave me alone so I can raise my son in peace." Kaito stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "We will see about that," he whispered. The next Saturday was warm and sunny. Natalie decided to take Takumi to the park near their home. She wanted to forget about Kaito and the shadow of the Mafia. She wanted to just be a mother for a few hours. Takumi was 4 years old and full of energy. He ran across the grass, his small sneakers hitting the ground with a soft thud. He was wearing his favorite blue shirt and carrying a toy plane. Natalie sat on a wooden bench and watched him play. She felt a little bit of peace for the first time in a week. But that peace did not last long. From the corner of her eye, she saw a tall man standing near a large oak tree. He was wearing a dark jacket and sunglasses. Even with his face partly covered, she knew it was Kaito. He was not hiding today. He was standing still, watching the children play. Takumi kicked his ball too hard, and it rolled right toward Kaito's feet. Natalie stood up quickly, her heart jumping into her throat. "Takumi, come back here," she called out. But the little boy did not listen. He ran straight up to the tall, scary man and stopped. Kaito looked down at the child. Slowly, he reached down and picked up the ball. He knelt on one knee, so he was at the same height as the boy. Natalie reached them just as Kaito handed the ball back to Takumi. She stepped between them, her face hard and angry. "I told you to stay away from us, Kaito. This is not the place for you." Kaito did not look at Natalie. He was staring at Takumi. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. His hands, which were usually steady and strong, shook just a little bit. He reached out as if to touch the boy's hair, but then he stopped. "Natalie," Kaito whispered. His voice was not cold anymore. It sounded like he was in pain. "Who is this boy?" "He is my son," Natalie snapped, grabbing Takumi's hand. "We are leaving." Kaito stood up slowly. He took off his sunglasses. His dark eyes were wide with shock. He looked at Takumi's face, then back at Natalie. The boy had the same sharp jawline as Kaito. He had the same thick, black hair. Most of all, Takumi had the exact same deep, dark eyes that looked like a hawk's. "He is 4 years ago," Kaito said. It was not a question. He was counting the time in his head. He remembered a night in a small hotel, a woman he couldn't forget, and a secret he never knew he left behind. Natalie pulled Takumi away, her face pale. She didn't say a word, but her eyes told him everything. Kaito watched them walk away, his heart beating harder than it ever had in a fight. He realized that he wasn't just protecting a doctor. He was protecting his own blood. That night, after Takumi was fast asleep, Natalie sat by her window. She watched the rain hit the glass. The sound took her back 5 years. It had been a night just like this one. A huge storm had trapped her in a small, quiet hotel far from the city. The lights had gone out, leaving the world in darkness and shadows. She had gone down to the lobby to find a candle. That was when she saw him. He was standing by the window, watching the lightning strike the sky. He was not wearing a suit then. He wore a simple black sweater and looked tired, like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Back then, she was just a young doctor traveling for work. She didn't know about syndicates or mafia families. She only saw a man who looked lonely. They had talked for hours by the fire. He told her his name was Kai. He told her he was a traveler who wanted to find a place where he could finally breathe. He was kind and gentle. He didn't act like a boss who gave orders. He listened to her dreams about saving lives and building a home. In the dark, without their titles or their pasts, they were just two people who found each other in a storm. Natalie remembered how his eyes had softened when he looked at her. It was the only time in her life she had felt completely seen. But when the sun came up and the storm passed, he was gone. He had left a small note saying he had to protect her by leaving. She never saw him again, and she never found out his last name. A few weeks later, she realized her life had changed forever. She had Takumi, A beautiful boy with a mysterious father she thought she would never see again. Now, sitting in her quiet apartment, Natalie put her head in her hands. The Kai she had met in the storm was gone. In his place was Kaito Arashi, a man covered in blood and secrets. He was the devil she had saved in the alley, and he was the stranger who had given her a son. She realized that Kaito probably didn't know she was the same woman either. That night in the hotel had been so dark, and she had been so young. But today at the park, the truth had finally come out. The way he looked at Takumi proved that the past was catching up to them. The storm was back, and this time, there was no place to hide. The secret was no longer safe. While Natalie tried to hide in her apartment, the streets of Tokyo were buzzing with whispers. In the dark corners where Kaito's enemies met, a new story was being told. They had seen the powerful Mafia boss kneeling in the park. They had seen the little boy with the sharp jaw and the hawk-like eyes. They realized that Kaito Arashi was no longer a man with nothing to lose. He had a weakness now, and that weakness had a name: Takumi. Monday morning started like any other day, but the air felt heavy. Natalie dropped Takumi off at his preschool. She kissed his forehead and watched him run inside to play with his blocks. She tried to tell herself that she was just being nervous, but her doctor's instinct told her something was wrong. As she drove to the hospital, she noticed a silver car following her. It wasn't one of Kaito's black sedans. This car was different. It moved fast and stayed close to her bumper. When she got to the hospital, Natalie couldn't focus. Every time her phone buzzed, she jumped. At noon, the peace finally shattered. Her phone rang, and the caller ID showed the preschool's number. Dr. Rowan? The teacher's voice sounded frightened. 2 men are here. They say they are your brothers, and that they came to pick up Takumi early. But you never told us you had brothers. Natalie's blood turned to ice. Do not let them near him. Lock the doors. I'm coming right now. She ran out of the hospital, her heart hammering against her chest. She didn't care about her car or the rules. She just ran. But as she reached the parking lot, the silver car blocked her path. 2 men stepped out. They didn't have the quiet respect of Kaito's men. They looked hungry and mean. Your son is very popular today, doctor, one of the men said with a cruel smile. The Korean syndicate wants to meet the little prince. If Kaito wants to keep his heir, he's going to have to give us everything he owns. Natalie felt a wave of pure terror, but then she felt something else: anger. She was a mother, and she would fight the devil himself to protect her child. She looked around for a way to escape, but she was trapped. Just as the men moved toward her, a loud screech of tires filled the air. Kaito's black car slammed into the silver one, pushing it aside. Kaito jumped out before the car even stopped moving. He didn't look like a businessman or a stranger from a storm. He looked like a monster ready to tear the world apart. He stood in front of Natalie, his back like a wall of iron. He pulled a heavy gun from his jacket and pointed it at the men. You made a big mistake, Kaito said, his voice shaking with rage. You touched my family. Now, there is nowhere left for you to hide. Natalie realized that her quiet life was gone forever. The war had started, and her son was right in the middle of it. The sound of the gunshots was still ringing in Natalie's ears. Smoke filled the air near the school entrance. Kaito's men were fighting hard, but the silver car was not alone. Another van had pulled up from the other side. Before Kaito could reach the doors, the van sped away, its tires screaming against the road. Natalie looked through the window of the van as it passed. She saw a small hand pressed against the glass. It was Takumi. No, Natalie screamed, her voice breaking. She tried to run after the van, but the world was a blur of noise and heat. Kaito grabbed her arm and pulled her back behind the safety of his car. His face was white, and his jaw was set tight. He looked at the street where the van had disappeared. For a moment, the powerful Mafia boss looked like he couldn't breathe. The anger in his eyes had turned into a cold, sharp focus. They took him, Natalie sobbed, hitting Kaito's chest with her fists. They took my baby. This is your fault. Your world did this. Kaito did not move. He let her hit him, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I know, he whispered. His voice was like ice. And I am the only one who can get him back. He pulled a radio from his belt and began shouting orders. He told his men to close every road. He told them to find that van or never show their faces again. He turned to Natalie and gripped her shoulders. His touch was firm, but his hands were still shaking. "Natalie, listen to me," Kaito said. "The people who took him do not want to hurt a child. They want to hurt me. They will use him to make me give up my territory. As long as I am alive and fighting, Takumi is a prize they need to keep safe. How can I trust you?" Natalie asked, tears streaming down her face. "You lied to me. You are a criminal. You bring death everywhere you go." Kaito looked her right in the eyes. The Kai from the storm was gone, and the devil was all that was left. "You don't have to like me, Natalie. You can hate me for the rest of your life. But right now, I am the only man in Tokyo with the power to tear this city apart to find our son. I will not sleep until he is back in your arms." Natalie looked at the smoke and the spent bullets on the ground. She looked at the man she feared most in the world. She realized she had no choice. She was a doctor, and she was a mother. She had to trust the monster to save the innocent. "Bring him back," she whispered, her voice cold and steady. "If you don't, I will never forgive you." Kaito nodded once. He opened the car door for her. "Get in. We are going to my headquarters. From this moment on, you do not leave my side." The car roared to life, chasing the shadows that had stolen their child. The hunt had begun. The Arashi headquarters was a tall building made of black glass and cold steel. Inside, screens covered the walls, showing maps of every street in Tokyo. Kaito stood in the center of the room. He was no longer the quiet man Natalie had seen in the park. He looked like a dragon ready to burn the world. He barked orders into a phone, and hundreds of men across the city began to move. "I found the silver van," a man shouted from a computer. "It is heading toward an old warehouse by the docks. It belongs to the Korean syndicate." Kaito didn't wait. He grabbed a heavy coat and a weapon. He looked at Natalie, who was standing by the door. Her face was pale, but her eyes were like flint. "Stay here where it is safe," he said. "No," Natalie said. Her voice was small, but very firm. "He is my son. I am going with you. If he is hurt, he will need a doctor. He will need his mother." Kaito looked at her for a long second. He saw the fire in her eyes and realized she would not back down. "Fine," he said, "but stay in the car until I say the area is clear. I am not losing both of you today." They raced toward the docks. The black car moved like a bullet through the dark streets. When they arrived, the warehouse was surrounded by men with guns. They were the enemies who had dared to touch a child. Kaito didn't even slow down. He told his driver to smash through the front gates. The warehouse exploded into noise and chaos. Kaito jumped out of the car before it even stopped. He moved with a speed that was terrifying to watch. He did not hide. He walked straight into the middle of the fight, taking down anyone who stood in his way. He was not just fighting for territory anymore. He was a father fighting for his blood. Natalie watched from the back of the car, her heart pounding. She saw Kaito kick open a heavy metal door at the back of the room. A man tried to stop him, but Kaito was too fast. He grabbed the man and threw him across the room like he was a toy. Kaito's face was covered in dust and sweat, but he didn't stop. He pushed through the last door. Inside a small, dark office, Takumi was sitting on a chair. His eyes were wide and filled with tears. When the door crashed open, the boy let out a sob. Kaito dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. He reached out and pulled the boy into a hug so tight that it looked like he would never let go. "I've got you," Kaito whispered into the boy's hair. "Dada is here. You're safe now." Natalie ran from the car and into the room. She fell to the floor next to them, wrapping her arms around both of them. For a moment, the blood and the war outside didn't matter. The devil had saved his heir, and the family was together in the dark. The warehouse was still a place of loud noises and danger. Natalie held Takumi close, but the fight was not over. From the shadows of the high ceiling, a man appeared on a metal walkway. He was the leader of the rival gang, and he was holding a long rifle. He didn't care about the child anymore. He only wanted to destroy Kaito. "Watch out," Natalie screamed. Kaito turned just as the man pulled the trigger. There was no time to hide. Instead of jumping away, Kaito stepped right in front of Natalie and Takumi. He made himself a human shield. A loud crack echoed through the room. Kaito's body jerked back, But he did not fall. He stayed standing, his teeth clenched in pain, until his own men took care of the shooter. Everything went quiet. The smoke began to clear. Kaito slowly turned around to look at Natalie. He tried to smile, but his face was very pale. A dark red stain began to spread across his white shirt, right over his heart. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees. "Kaito!" Natalie cried. She caught him before his head hit the hard floor. She quickly moved into doctor mode. She forgot that he was a mafia boss. She forgot about the scary cars and the guns. To her, he was just a patient who had given his life to save hers. She ripped open his shirt to see the wound. It was bad. The bullet had gone deep, and he was losing a lot of blood very fast. "Stay with me, Kai," she whispered, using his old name. "Keep your eyes open. Look at me." Kaito looked up at her. For the first time, the devil was gone. He didn't look powerful or scary. He looked small and vulnerable. He reached out with a shaking hand and touched Takumi's cheek. The boy was crying, holding onto Kaito's sleeve. Is he okay?" Kaito asked. His voice was just a tiny whisper. "He's fine. You saved him," Natalie said, pressing her hands against the wound to stop the bleeding. "Now you have to let me save you. Do you hear me? You can't leave us now." Kaito let out a soft breath. A small, real smile touched his lips. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. "I just found you." His eyes drifted shut, and his head fell back against her arm. Natalie felt a wave of fear, but she didn't stop working. She barked orders at Kaito's men to get the car ready and call the hospital. She saw the blood on her hands, but she didn't feel sick. She felt a deep need to keep this man alive. He had broken every rule in his world to protect them. As the sirens began to wail in the distance, Natalie realized that she didn't just see a patient or a father. She saw a man who truly loved them. The hospital was quiet as the sun began to set over Tokyo. Kaito lay in the bed, his face finally showing a bit of color. The surgery had been long and difficult, but Natalie had not left his side for a single minute. She had been the one to sew the wound in his chest, the wound he had taken to keep a bullet from hitting her. Kaito slowly opened his eyes and saw Natalie sitting in the chair next to him. She was holding Takumi, who was fast asleep in her arms. Kaito reached out a weak hand, and Natalie took it. Her grip was tight and warm. There were no more secrets between them. The Kai from the storm and the Kaito from the shadows were the same man, and he was the father of her child. "I thought I lost you," Natalie whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. Kaito looked at his son and then back at Natalie. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere. I have too much to live for now." Natalie looked at him for a long time. She knew that Kaito was not a perfect man. He was a monster to his enemies, and his hands were covered in the dust of a violent world. But she also knew that he was the only man who had ever truly protected her. He was a mafia king, but to Takumi, he was a hero. She realized that she couldn't change who he was, but she could choose to stand by him. "We can't go back to how things were," Natalie said softly. "Your world is dangerous, Kaito. I'm a doctor. I save people. I don't know if our lives can ever truly fit together." Kaito squeezed her hand. "I am already changing things, Natalie. I am closing the darkest parts of my business. I want Takumi to grow up in the light, not the shadows. It will take time, but I will do anything to keep this family together." Natalie felt a weight lift off her heart. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. "Then we will take it one day at a time." A few weeks later, the three of them stood on the balcony of Kaito's high-rise penthouse. The city lights of Tokyo sparkled like diamonds below them. Kaito stood with his arm around Natalie, and Takumi stood between them, holding both of their hands. Natalie looked at the man on her left and the boy in the middle. Her life was no longer simple or quiet. She was a doctor who loved a king, and they were raising a boy who would one day inherit a very different kind of empire. They were three people from different worlds, bound together by a night and a storm and a love that was stronger than power. As the wind blew softly across the balcony, Natalie finally felt at peace. The war was over, and their story was just beginning. 1 year later, the grand doors of the Arashi estate opened. The room inside was filled with the most powerful men in Japan. They sat around a long, dark table, their faces stern and cold. These were the leaders of the other syndicates. They had come to see if Kaito Arashi had truly grown soft, as the rumors said. Kaito stood at the head of the table. He looked stronger than ever, but he was not alone. To his right stood Natalie. She was not wearing her doctor's lab coat today. She wore a stunning, floor-length silk dress the color of deep rubies. Her hair was styled perfectly, and her eyes held the same steady, fearless look that had once saved Kaito's life in a rainy alley. To Kaito's left stood Takumi. The boy was 5 years old now. He wore a small, neat suit and stood tall, looking at the men with his father's hawk-like eyes. "Gentlemen," Kaito's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "You asked why the Arashi family has changed. You asked who is responsible for the new laws in this city." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Kaito reached out and took Natalie's hand, lifting it for everyone to see. "This is Dr. Natalie Rowan," Kaito announced. "She is the woman who saved my life when my own men could not. She is the mother of my heir. And from this day forward, she is the queen of the Arashi family. Her word is my word. Her safety is the city's safety." One of the older leaders narrowed his eyes. "A doctor? You allow a woman of medicine to influence the path of the sword?" Natalie stepped forward before Kaito could answer. She didn't raise her voice, but it filled the room with authority. "I have spent my life fixing the damage men like you cause," she said, looking the old man right in the eye. "I know exactly where the heart is, both how to save it and how to stop it. If you want a future for your families, you will listen to what we have to build. If not, you can find out just how protective a mother can be." Kaito let out a short, proud laugh. The other leaders looked at each other, stunned by her bravery. Slowly, the old man stood up and bowed his head deeply. One by one, the other men followed. They were not just bowing to Kaito anymore. They were bowing to the family that had finally tamed the dragon. As the meeting ended, Takumi looked up at his parents and smiled. The Arashi name still carried power, but now it also carried hope. Together, they walked out of the room and into the garden, leaving the shadows behind for good.